Hello everyone, and again, welcome to Taylor Aerospace. Today we'll be attempting a manned mission to Duna. And if anyone could hear that sound, that's my phone going off. I'm not trying this again. This is the third time I've attempted an intro to this video. Let's keep going. So here you'll see me walk through making the the orbital ship. We're doing an Apollo style mission with obviously therefore an orbital command pod. Which I'll refer to as command pod, mothership, whatever, and then obviously we'll have a lander as well. So first up here you can see I'm putting some parachutes. This will be the pod that will be coming home with us to Kerbal. There's a Clampertron docking port on the top and then a heat shield underneath. We've got our decoupler under that, and I then put a remote guidance unit to this as well. Just because in case there's no Kerbal in it, or in case I'm using a Kerbal that doesn't have access to manoeuvre nodes. This just makes it easier. I like doing it. You don't need to include this if you don't want. I don't think there's any need for it in this mission actually, it's just out of habit I attached that. So now we're using the Mark 1 liquid engine fuel tanks, and we're stacking 4 of them in the centre, and then 2 of them radially times 4 on the outside. Then we're attaching the atomic engine to all 4 sides. This will have quite a low thrust to weight ratio, but it's got very, very high specific impulse. It's incredibly efficient. So I'm just turning it upside down now to attach the lander ship, which I'm using the Mark 2 command pod. Again with a couple of parachutes. Duna does have a tenuous atmosphere. It's enough that parachutes will mostly do the job, if I'm honest. So you don't have to worry too much. Then underneath that, we're attaching the Science Junior unit with all of the science you can put. Obviously, I'm putting quite a lot of things here because I'm playing this in the sandbox mode. If you're playing on career or science, you might not have all of these pieces of equipment, but it's always good to include as much science as you can. Because Duna does have an atmosphere, you can see I'm taking the atmospheric pressure measurement system on the back. So under this is just a very small fuel tank. That's all you need for Duna, and we'll put the Terrier engine under that. I will radially attach here, as you can see, just 3 of the very, very small fuel tanks, just to help put the legs. I'll attach the landing legs to this, and it puts the legs a little bit further out, and it gives you a little bit more balance, makes the craft a little bit wider. Also gives a little bit of extra fuel, but honestly you don't really need it. So we'll attach the Terrier engine under there. That's all you need to get away from Duna. And then we strut it all together just to make sure that it's all nice and secure. So we turn that back upside down again, and from here I'll start making the second and first stages of the rocket to actually get this thing into orbit. So obviously you need to give it a fairing because this thing is incredibly undynamic. Oh, you'll see I forgot to add any electricity. So I'm chucking a load of batteries onto this, and then the Gigantor solar panels. Obviously use any solar panel you can find, or if you've got RTGs, use the RTGs because they're fantastic as well. I'm then putting a couple of relay transmitter discs on it, and that's purely dishes, sorry, not discs, and that's purely to be able to connect with the Kerbal Space Center, because there will not be a pilot in the command pod when this is an orbital ship. So we'll put the fairing back on. You'll also see I just added a couple of solar panels and some batteries to the landing pod as well. It's useful to do. So from here we will make the second stage, which is just a skipper engine connected to one of the larger fuel tanks, and then a decoupler under there, and we'll go for the Jumbo 64 then, and we will radially put 4 different engines onto this. Personally, I'm using the Jumbo 64 again. There's probably more efficient ways to do this, if I'm honest, but go hard or go home, I suppose. So that's got the mainsail in the middle, and then 4 skipper engines on each pod on the outside. And we'll just try and make this a bit more aerodynamic here by putting some nose cones and whatnot on top. And you can see that I've decided that I'm going to go for those ones instead. And I'm clearly struggling to actually get it in the correct way. But yeah, there's probably a bit more efficient ways to do this, but I like to have as much fuel as I can, to be honest. So we'll strut all this together, one at the bottom, one at the top. And I'm just lowering this now, getting it a bit more to where I actually like it, so it's a bit more aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, I will be adding some fuel lines to this as well. Here we go. And this is just so that the fuel feeds from the outer tanks into the center tank, so that when you detach, the center tank will also have full fuel. And I'm adding some wings here now, and this will hopefully make it a little bit more stable in the air. I mean, this is a big ship, it's not going to be the most aerodynamically capable of ships. It's long, it's heavy. So you can see here I'm just checking the ship, making sure I haven't missed anything, checking all the staging, making all the staging correct. And then we can warp over to our launch. Okay, so full throttle up. And I won't be going through a completely deep walkthrough here of how to get into orbit. If you really need help in just getting your ship up into orbit, then I advise going and watching some of my older videos, because you should probably attempt going to somewhere like the Mun or Minmus first before you attempt an interplanetary mission. If you're not really sure on how to get a ship into orbit, then this may be a bit more too advanced for you, but I'll put a link in the top corner in the ad later on to link you back to one of my old videos where I do go a lot more in depth into this sort of thing. Maybe that might be the video for you. But yeah, we just need to tip over on this ship though. Pretty hard, it's quite a big ship. Obviously I've spread the footage up here, so it will take you a bit longer. It's not as quick as this looks. But I think I did quite well here, if I'm honest with you. I'm quite happy with this. So you go to detach the outer stage, and then you can see what I mean as well. The inner fuel tank is full, and I could have done full asparagus staging with this, which is where you drop the one set of the tanks first, and then you drop the second set of tanks. So, but that would have made it more efficient. But I honestly couldn't be bothered. This has got enough fuel as it is. I mean, you can see there my Ascent profile was pretty good. It could have been better, but it was alright. It was quite nice. But yeah, it was. I just couldn't be bothered. This has got enough fuel. It's got plenty. We can do this. So we'll deploy the. I'm obviously. Yeah, you can see here I'm just checking my action groups, which is probably something I should have done sooner, but never mind. Okay, and we'll just warp around now to our manoeuvre node and get ourselves into a nice clean circular orbit of Kerbin. Okay, we'll detach the lower stage now, and we're on to the second stage. That will just have enough just to push us into orbit, and then we can ditch that and use our nuclear engines as our interplanetary stage. The nuclear engines, as I say, are incredibly fuel efficient, but they're not very fast. So burn times tend to be in the sort of 3-4 minute range, as opposed to 1 or 2, 1.5 minutes or 50 seconds of the more powerful engines. Oh, you can see here as well, I'm getting into a Duna transfer window. I probably should have done this beforehand, but you can see it's where if the solar system's a clock, and and the sun is the center, and Kerbin is at 3 o'clock. Duna is roughly between 1 and 2. I believe it's a 54-degree angle you're looking for, so between 1 and 2 o'clock. You can see here, I'll spread the manoeuvre node outwards, and I'm just playing about with it here, and you can see the grey markers. If you set Duna as a target, you can see the grey markers there. And you just play with the manoeuvre node, pull them in, you just pull. You need to be on the outside of the planet as well, so where my manoeuvre node is, you use then Kerbin's gravity to assist you and throw you out. And you can see here, I'm just manoeuvring it round just to try and get those grey manoeuvre node markers as close as possible. Okay, so you can see that from there, I'm trying to get the grey manoeuvre nodes close to each other. I'm highlighting them here and then just playing around to get that number to come down. I think it's about 50,000 metres, I think, for Duna. No, it's not. It can't be. 50,000 kilometres, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, you can see here that I've managed to get a Duna intercept. So from there, we will warp around and hit our manoeuvre node. Now, as you can see, this is quite a long burn. And we'll use the last of our orbital stage there just to use what's in it. There's no point wasting that fuel. There's quite a lot there. As I did say, this craft has far more fuel than you need. And that proves it. I mean, if you screw up the Ascent profile, you still have enough just to nudge yourself there. And it's fine. So, yeah, just point at your... If you don't have, by the way, all of the manoeuvre nodes unlocked yet, just point prograde. It's roughly where you need to be. It won't be quite as accurate, but on these big interplanetary missions, you don't need to be hugely accurate until slightly later in the mission. As long as you get an intercept, that is fine. That's all you need. You can then adjust that and work on that later about exactly where you're going to land. So you can see here that I will cancel the maneuver node just so I can watch those grey nodes markers appear and watch them fall into place on their own. There you go. There is your Duna intercept. So I set a maneuver node about halfway along the track. And if you focus on Duna, you can actually then go in and play around with the maneuver node and see where your projected orbital line will appear. So I'm using the anti-normal marker just to pull this down and get it roughly an equatorial orbit of Duna. I don't think I actually managed to pull that off, but I get close enough. And then from there, using some of the other maneuver nodes, mostly prograde and retrograde, just to pull it in and get it as close. I like to go for roughly 70 to 100 kilometers above Duna's surface. Duna's atmosphere, by the way, starts at about 50. So anything above 50 is fine. But yeah, if you go below that, you will get caught in its atmosphere. So I'm just warping forward now then to that maneuver node marker. And you really don't need much at these enormous orbital velocities. You don't need much at all. So it doesn't take much fuel. And then, yeah, you can watch it. You can just, if you focus back on Duna again, and you can watch your orbital line come in. And there we go. That's it. So I'm adding a maneuver node now onto the... There we go, the periapsis of my Duna orbit, and then just pulling retrograde, and you can get yourself a circularized orbit. Okay, so now we're warping then to get ourselves into Duna's sphere of influence. And I think this is quite... I want to go out here and say this is quite a nice ship. I mean, it's very similar to a lot of what other people have designed, but, you know. Anyway, so as soon as you're in Duna's sphere of influence, start doing all of your science equipment, because you will get science for whatever it is, you know, mystery goo or crew report or whatever, high in space, high above Duna. So you can get that here, and then when you warp closer to Duna, you can then get in space just above Duna. So there's two sets of science you can get. So I'm sending out Bob just to collect all of the science and then reset all of the experiments as well. It's partly why I brought him along. It's also partly why he will be landing, part of the landing party as well, along with Jeb, because you know Jeb can actually fly it. So yeah, just use Bob's EVA just to manoeuvre around and pick up all of your science that you can. We'll get him back inside now, safe and sound. First we do an EVA report, cannot forget about that, obviously. We'll get him back inside, safe and sound, and we'll warp over to our manoeuvre node that we set earlier. Point towards your manoeuvre node, which is literally just retrograde, and then as soon as you need to, start burning that engine. It's quite a long manoeuvre node, it's quite a long burn, but that's because, again, the atomic engines, the nuclear engines, they're just not that efficient in that regard. Sorry, that's a lie. They're incredibly efficient. They're not powerful. So this is unfortunately quite a long burn. And again, my footage is sped up slightly because I didn't want the video to be an hour and 20 minutes long. So yours won't operate this quickly. But you see there, I'm just keeping an eye on it. And here is your first view. If this is your first time, this is your first view of Duna. I think it's quite pretty as a planet. I think it's quite an interesting planet to visit, particularly with the poles. It has, like Mars does in real life, it has polar ice caps. So I think that's amazing, and I love going there. I love taking rovers to the ice caps and landing on them, but that's something you could obviously do in the future. So there you go, a nice circularized orbit around Duna. We are safe and sound around the red planet. So then, all we need to do is all of our science again. I'm not getting it, by the way, if you're just wondering, I did mention it earlier, but I'm doing this on the sandbox mode, the creative mode effectively, so I don't get any science. But I'm just showing you what you can do. Obviously mine says 0 science though. So you can do all of your science and then take Bob out again and just grab all of those and reset everything that you need to. So you can see I'm just doing that, just picking up all of our lovely, lovely tasty science, running what hasn't been run as well, and just picking everything up and then resetting it. Bob there, not tethered to anything, as opposed to what they would do in real life, which is honestly quite scary. Come on, Bob, I know you can do it. You're an incredibly intelligent scientist. An omnidisciplinary scientist, apparently, as well. So I'm actually going to put him here in the... I'm going to board him back into the lander pod, because that's where he's going to go. So I might as well do that now rather than using the transfer mechanic. So I'm deciding here where I want to land. And where I want to land is in Duna's Midland Sea, which is the big dark bit you can see on its surface. It's relatively flat compared to other areas of Duna. So yeah, you can just come around to this point and then pull retrograde. You can see my orbit's not quite equatorial, but that doesn't really matter. And when you get to that, just pull full thrust on retrograde. It'll pull your orbital line down. You get a rough idea of where approximately you'll land. So here you see I will transfer jab. Oh, I've already transferred jab. I didn't see me doing that. Okay, so I've undocked there. And here you go. Here's me transferring jab because I apparently forgot to do it earlier. So I've undocked the ships though. You just right click on the docking ports and select undock, and then I will go to my mothership and point myself retrograde whilst giving the command pod a happy little whack there just to say good luck, a solar panel high five, and point myself prograde and get myself back into an appropriate orbit before the mothership obviously crashes. So once you're back over 50,000 meters, you can then switch back to your lander pod. Oh, I had a problem, yeah, with the staging here for some reason, so I had to be a bit odd with that. You see me trying to play around, it just wouldn't activate them. It was a bit odd, but it did it eventually. Point yourself retrograde, activate your parachutes, and then just fast forward. So yeah, Duna's got a very tenuous atmosphere. It is enough that parachutes will mostly do the job. You might sometimes need to use a thruster, but it's not that bad. Parachutes will normally get it done. Now you can see here, I'm doing the science experiments again, in space just above Duna. Oh, sorry, space high up in Duna's atmosphere, sorry, is what I'm doing here. Sorry, yeah, I've already done those ones, haven't I? So, again, we'll send Bob out just to grab everything he can. I wasn't confident enough letting go of the ladder, and there were some things I couldn't reach from here. So, there was only a couple of things that I reset and did at that point. So yeah, press G to activate your gear action group and lower your landing legs. And again, we'll fast forward time, having collected all of our lovely science high up in Duna's atmosphere. So you can see now I've switched that over to the show not sea level, height above sea level, but height above actual land. Just gives us a better representation of how high we are. And you can see it does look kind of scary because you do come in kind of fast, but your parachutes will go off. And you can see here now I'm doing even more science in Duna's lower atmosphere, or flying over Duna. And my parachutes are finally starting to activate. Whilst I pick up all of my lovely science. So this is what now, the fourth set of science we've managed to gather from this trip. You get a lot of science from doing this. And there we go. And we just allow our drogue chutes to slow us down as we're hitting the lower parts of the atmosphere. Now you see we're only 1,000 meters above sea level, or above sea level land. Our bigger parachutes open. And there we go. Now you also notice this isn't actually quite enough. So you need to get your speed quite low really on Duna. Anything, kind of like the Mun I guess, anything below about 4 meters a second would be preferable. So you can see here, I just wait until I'm 100 meters or so above the ground, and then just use my thruster just to slow myself down. And there we go. We've landed safely on Duna. Isn't it beautiful? Look at that beautiful red sky. And the camera clipping through the ground, because that's helpful. Right, okay, so first things first, let's do all of our lovely science. Now this is what, our 5th set of science? Yeah, we had science in space, high over Duna, close to Duna, upper atmosphere, lower atmosphere, and now on the surface. So this is why Bob came, so we can reset all of our lovely science and pick that up. And this will... I wish I'd actually done this in a science mode just to see how much science this would be. I reckon it would be at least a couple of thousand. At least. Okay. Now, there are a couple of other things you can do on Duna, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, and you'll see that in a moment, such as, I mentioned this in my Mun video, but you can have Duna stones, and then there's little rocks called blueberries, I think because they look like blueberries, although they're not blue, which is unfair. Yeah, and you can pick those up and bring them home. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any on this trip, but I'll go into more detail on that in a moment. So yeah, also, Bob, right now, as you can see from his jumping, is incredibly irritated that whoever designed this thing didn't bother to install any ladders. He is trying to reach the science equipment just to be able to reset it and gather all the data. But yeah, the non-ladder will become slightly more of an issue later on, but he hasn't thought of that yet. So let's do our ESA and surface sample, and more importantly, plant the flag. The Kerbal space program has achieved something that the NASA, have not been able to. Landing on Duna. It's one big leap for little green people. So, and there's a little visual. Bob is extremely happy. Jeb actually doesn't come out because, you know, Jeb is dedicated to his piloting skills and he isn't bothered about this exploration stuff. He just wants to fly things and in crazy situations. Now, Bob is aware that there are things such as Duna stones, and he is trying to have a look for them by manipulating the camera. Somehow he can do that. Yeah, let's pull away from this narrative now. Yeah, so this is where I was trying to look for Duna stones and blueberries. Unfortunately, all I could find was scatter terrain features, not actual terrain features, and I just thought, you know, you can just run around and explore, but I thought to myself, you know, I'm making a YouTube video, not trying to get everything I can, because it could take me 15-20 minutes to run around finding that, and there's only so much you can compress this footage in Sony Vegas before it starts becoming a bit weird and corrupted. So you can see here, this is the moment I've given up and decided to get back to the ship, and you will now understand why having a ladder is important. Well, it's important if you're really rubbish at flying EVA anyway, because you get bang. Ow. Let's try again. Oh, I wish there was a ladder. Bang. Ow. And right now, Bob is getting incredibly frustrated. Look at that face. That is the face of a man who is very frustrated with the person who built this vessel. And he will be writing a very strongly worded letter. He's frustrated, he's losing his temper, he's feeling that he's never going to get home, and he doesn't know what to do. Oh, never mind, he's got it. Fine. Right. So now, one of the more important bits, and actually I feel one of the trickier bits, certainly one of the trickier bits I had anyway when I started playing this game, and I see a lot of people mentioning it online that it can be quite tricky, is a rendezvous. I have actually done another video on Rendezvous where I go a little bit more into detail about exactly how to do this. I'll put a little link into the top corner if you want to watch that. It goes slightly more in depth on this stuff. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. But just here, I've placed the mothership just above us in the orbit, and you can see the target marker there. So let's lift off at full throttle and turn roughly to follow where the mothership would be crossing, which for me is roughly around the 90-degree mark. Okay, so you can see that I'm trying to match the inclination here. Not very well, I might add. I probably should have done this while I was in orbit, but never mind. I'm roughly trying to match the so that the otherwise my orbital plane would have been equatorial rather than tilted slightly. In case you're not sure what I meant there by inclination, just to make sure. I know a lot of people would, and a lot of people can call out like, oh, of course I know, but you know, there are some people who are very, very new to this stuff, and I like to try and accommodate everyone on these videos, because they are tutorials at the end of the day. Okay, so you can see there that my orbit line, my orbital line is starting to get higher and starting to reach. There we go. So I'm just there we go. So I've managed to get that my apoapsis just above the atmosphere, and I'm extending that now outwards prograde to get a nice circularized orbit. And at this point, I've decided that I'm just going to get a circularized orbit, and then I'll try and meet a rendezvous from there, rather than just heading straight for the mothership, because I don't quite have enough fuel to do that sort of a maneuver, unfortunately. So we'll fast forward time now. Unfortunately, because I'm quite low in the atmosphere, it puts limitations on how fast you can fast forward through this time, but never mind. So there you go, I'll circularise this orbit now, and the little orange and purple markers are your rendezvous markers. So you can see that I'm looking at what the separation will be, and how far away I'm going to be from the ship. So I'm tilting my inclination as well, just to match, and get that ascending and descending nodes to roughly 0.0 is fine. 0.1 or 2 is also fine. Doesn't really matter. So I'm also now going to point retrograde just to pull that intercept line as close as possible. So I'm warping around to that point, and you need to make sure that the nav ball is target, not orbit or surface, and then point retrograde and slow down to 0. Knock off all your relative speed to the target. Then point yourself at the target and go. You can see that I'm getting closer. Point retrograde. And then once again, as soon as you get as close as you need to, knock off all of your speed. And you can see here, I just keep doing that. Retrograde, knock off speed, target, get close, retrograde again. And you're basically nudging yourself closer and adjusting your trajectory each time just to get a little bit more accurate in where you're pointing. Unfortunately, I'm on the dark side of the planet here where the sun isn't, so you can't really see much, but you can see here I'm approaching the mothership. It's quite big and it's looming over into sight now. Now, I do dock these, but you don't have to. You could just go EVA and go between them, but whatever. So you set the docking port as your target, and this is the lazy way of doing it, okay? And then you go to your other ship, you find the docking port on that one, set that as target, and then on your nav ball, set target as your finder. So now both ships will automatically align themselves. So you can see here, I'll point at target, and I will now just go forward. This is why you don't need RCS thrusters and whatnot for this lazy method. And then the other ship, the mothership, will automatically, as you can see there, align itself, because it is also pointed at the target, and I happen to be the target. So there we go. I'll transfer both the Kerbals back. We'll take Bob out and grab all of the science from the command pod. Go back in. Now, that way, all the science, you need to do that. You need to transfer all the science over as well. You don't need to do this bit, but I did. I'm just taking what is left of all the fuel from the lander and putting it back into the mothership. The mothership has enough fuel, but it's just something I do out of habit more than anything. But yeah, you can just do an EVA and EVA between them. You don't need to actually do the full docking procedure. But again, the docking procedure can be quite difficult in the rendezvous thing. The lazy method is much better, I find anyway, than RCS thrusters and whatnot. It's not as realistic, mind, so if you want proper realism. So yeah, I've undocked the ship and let it go. I'm not bringing that back because it's too much weight. So you can see here now I'm putting a prograde marker on the sort of inside of Mars, if you like, or Duna, sorry. So that way it brings, when you do prograde, it brings your orbit down into the orbit of Kerbin. But you can unfortunately see I'm nowhere near. I'm just not in a good place, and I'm fast forwarding here to try and gain myself a better orbital approach, because it's just, yeah, you can do it. You can, I call it brute forcing it. As long as you've got enough fuel, you can practically make anything from any sort of transfer window. It doesn't matter, but I don't have enough fuel in this to do that. I need a more efficient, a more sort of traditional, I suppose, escape trajectory. So I'm just fast forwarding the time here. It's quite a long time. I think it's over a year in Kerbal time. But yeah, so if you're interested, the optimal, traditional way to get back would be roughly the same actually as it is to get to Duna. Because you're orbiting slower than Kerbin is. Kerbin needs to be behind you, so to speak. But it's roughly the same, that if you were looking at it as a clock, Kerbin is at the 3 o'clock mark, the sun is in the centre, Kerbin is at the 3 o'clock mark, and Duna is at a roughly 50-54 degree angle. You can see here, I keep trying to get an intercept line with Kerbin, but it's just not working, and I keep needing to pull it in to get the actual think, you know, this is how, if you go to any sort of tutorial, this is how they will tell you to do it. But you can brute force it. If you have enough fuel, you can just brute force it as much as you like. So that's fine. But yep, so I'm roughly at about the right angle now. And again, you need to be on the inside of Duna, if that sort of makes sense. And then you can see here the little grey nodes. I'm just playing around with sort of radial in, radial out, and prograde, retrograde, and just trying to get those numbers down, just so I can get an intercept. I don't actually need anything more than that. I just need to get into Kerbin's sphere of influence. Anything else doesn't matter. I can do that on the journey. So there you go. So we'll warp around to our maneuver node and point towards our maneuver. And again, burn. This is an incredibly long burn. Again, the nuclear engines, they're great for a lot of things. Speed is not one of them. Yeah, they are the most efficient engines in the world. But they're not great at really anything else, to be honest. That's why I've slapped 4 of them on. I actually tried this mission with a single engine, but it was far too slow. Far too slow. But anyway, goodbye, Duna. It was nice seeing you. But we're going home now. Okay, so you can see me setting up a maneuver node again, like we did when we came to Duna, roughly halfway. I'm selecting Kerbin and focusing my view there, and I'm just using the maneuver node to pull my maneuver in. And what I'm actually going to do is pull my periapsis into Kerbin's atmosphere. Right down into Kerbin's atmosphere, between 30k and 25k in height, or 25,000 and 30,000 kilometers. It will show those numbers. Yeah, so my idea is that I will aerobrake. I will slam into Kerbin's atmosphere, and it should slow me down to just... That way I don't need to circularize my orbit at Kerbin. I can just crash, effectively. Controlled crash. And who knows? We'll see whether it will work. I didn't have much faith in it, because I did a quick save. And I don't know if you've noticed, I haven't quick saved at all up until this point. I don't think I have anyway. Have I? Well, let me know in the comments if you can see that I've quick saved it all somewhere. But yeah, so here you go. You can see me pulling it in and just highlighting the periapsis just so I can see how low it gets. Oh, there we go. I'm pretty much happy with that. I'm adding a maneuver node there just to see whether I would actually have enough fuel to slow down and circularize my orbit at all. I don't think I would. I might have had enough, but I eventually decide just to aerobrake, quote unquote. Yeah, that's my plan anyway. Slam into the atmosphere, slow down, and land that way. You'd be amazed in this game, actually. Don't be scared too much of doing that. If you don't have enough fuel, if you've planned something out and you don't have enough fuel to recircularize at Kerbin, the ablators or heat shields in this game are very overpowered. You can slam into the atmosphere at enormous speeds, like I am talking like 4,000 meters a second or so, and you slow down enough and the heat shields are powerful enough that you don't need anything else. So yeah, if you want to recircularize, I normally try to. On this mission, unfortunately, I made a couple of screw-ups here and there, and I didn't have enough fuel. But anyway, back to what's on screen. So we've warped all the way to Kerbin now. I'm pointing myself prograde, just because when I hit the atmosphere, I like to then separate, immediately hit retrograde, and I flip round, so my heat shield can take all that damage. And then I can watch all the fireworks as my engines and whatnot explode. So you can see I'll do that. We'll decouple, immediately point retrograde, and watch ourselves some fireworks in the night sky. Unfortunately, it is the night sky. With this method, it's difficult to control where or when you'll land. You're just going to hit the atmosphere and slow. But you can see I'm hitting this from interplanetary speeds. I made no attempt to slow down. My heat shield is absorbing all of the damage here. And there we are. We're through the most dangerous bit of the atmosphere. Make sure your parachutes are staged as well. And they'll come out and save you. And that is it. We're home. We're home and dry. This has got far too many parachutes on it. But it slows it down and it's safe. I'll jettison the heat shield here as well, just to save us an extra couple 1 or 1.5 meters a second of speed, because it is quite heavy. And there we are. Our Duna mission is complete. You'll get a lot of science out of this, hopefully. and hopefully if you've been struggling to get to Duna, well, maybe this video will give you some tips. But here we are, landing back on Kerbin, safe and sound, and we'll recover this vessel with all 3 of our Kerbals inside. They have had one hell of a journey, haven't they? So we'll go back to the Kerbal Space Center now and pick up all of our science. It won't be anything for me because I'm in sandbox mode, but for you it should be a couple of thousand. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've been able to learn something from it. If you needed to, that's great. Give it a like, give it a subscribe if you really enjoyed it. This is a new channel, and I'll be pushing out more content each week. But for now, that's enough from me, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Thanks.